you can't help but remember, the past. And those questions that you asked just now were also asked, a few weeks ago when we played Vanderbilt and so forth. And so, our guys, should remember that, because our experiences help us be better the next time around.
Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and we are glad to have you with us today. It is week 12. Today is our preview show. It's 11/11 as well, by the way. So good luck to everybody, and happy Veterans Day as well to everybody out there that has served. We love you. We appreciate you. I personally believe that we live in the greatest country in the world, and we wouldn't be that if not for the incredible veterans that have left it all on the line for us. So happy Veterans Day, and thank you so much for your service. We have a very exciting show today, and we have a lot of games that are going to factor in, not just to the college football playoff rankings, but possibly, when you look forward, a lot of conference championship races that will be decided. There are a couple games in our breakdowns that wouldn't normally be top billing, but because of how important they are when it comes to who's going to play in the ACC title game, they made their way in. So we will break down Virginia and Duke, even though it might not generate the audience that we would normally have for some of our big breakdowns. That's a highly important game in a week like this. So we are at that point. Every breakdown we do is of a game of circumstance. And there are a few that we have excluded, massive margins for Ohio State and Indiana. We don't necessarily feel as though those teams are in legitimate jeopardy, but there are a few games this week that have pretty sizable lines. We're going to tell you the pathway to an upset. How does it occur? For me to tell you that Texas A&M is going to beat South Carolina doesn't do you a lot of good. I just want to know, in the event in which it became competitive, what needs to happen for South Carolina for that game to become competitive. Cool? So we'll do that throughout the show today. Of course, break down the biggest games, the most impactful games of the weekend. But before we get to all that, I encourage all of you, go and check out the podcast, subscribe to it on the platform of your choosing. Doesn't matter which one. We're on all of them. So you take the one that you enjoy the most. And while you're there, go ahead and leave us a rating. It helps us out a lot, and it should take no more than 2 or 3 seconds for you. So it helps us out, and we appreciate those of you that have lifted up our ratings after the sabotage that occurred a couple years ago. We also want to encourage you to check out the ESPN College Football YouTube page. We will put out clips from this show and others throughout the rest of the week. And then, of course, we'll be back tomorrow with our college football playoff rankings release. So let's kick things off on a Friday night clash in the ACC involving two teams that we thought would be at the top of the ACC rankings. However, just one is currently in contention for the conference crown. Clemson travels to Louisville. Louisville's about a 3.5 point favorite. This game's 7:30 Eastern time on ESPN. Louisville's 7-2, 4-2 in the ACC. They enter this game in pretty disappointing fashion after their overtime loss at the hands of Cal. They were at that point, prior to the loss, legitimate ACC championship contenders. They had college football playoff aspirations, and those evaporated in shocking defeat last week. Meanwhile, Clemson, they arrived kind of on an upswing after a disastrous 1-3 start. They started the year in the top 5, preseason ACC favorite. They are all of a sudden starting to round into form, and they are coming off a dominant 24-10 victory over Florida State that injected some, quote, newfound swagger into the program. This game will come down to two things: quarterback play and offensive line play. Number one, which quarterback do you give the advantage to? Cade Klubnik for Clemson, 2,100 yards, 14-5 touchdown to interception ratio, but he is playing some of his best football of the season. In the 5 games preceding the Florida State win, he averaged over 300 passing yards a game, 13-2 touchdown interception ratio, and I think has battled. I mean, he has really battled throughout this season. He was very efficient in the Florida State game, goes for 221, a couple touchdowns, and this resurgence will probably face his toughest test yet. Louisville is a top 30 pass defense that has been pretty good when it comes to affecting the opposing quarterback. So a very tough matchup for Cade Klubnik, especially knowing he might be without some weaponry in the wide receiver room. Miller Moss, on the other side, has also had a pretty decent season, but things are maybe heading back down a little bit after the embarrassing loss to Cal, where he threw 38 passes for just 203 yards. Did have an interception and took a really bad sack at the end of regulation. But here's the good news. He's going against a pretty vulnerable pass defense, which is currently in the hundreds right now in yards per game given up through the air. Question 2, which offensive line will play better? Well, we just talked about Clemson's challenges on the back end with their secondary. So how do they protect their secondary? Well, the strength of their team is along the defensive line. Still a pretty nasty front seven, including 2 of the best D linemen in college football with TJ Parker on the edge and Peter Woods on the interior. This front generated 6 sacks in their most recent performance against Florida State, and they're going against an offensive line that has had some challenges this year. I think Louisville's offensive line actually played decent against Cal, so maybe progress is being made up front offensively, but I think they're going to have their hands full. They are, for sure. And if you look at the Miami game, this was an offensive line that played against a really good defensive front from Miami with NFL guys on that front. They did an adequate job in that matchup. Now, Clemson's offensive line, they are very one-dimensional offensively. They're not good running the football, just over 120 yards a game, and they're about to go against a Louisville run defense that's one of the best in the ACC, just over 100 yards per game given up. Now, why has the Clemson run game suffered? Well, partly because they don't have great depth or experience in the backfield at running back, but a lot of it's because of the offensive line. This was a group that was expected to be one of the better groups in the ACC, and they have yet to live up to those expectations. They have been very inconsistent, and if you look at things through the end of October, they were under 2 yards per carry in the red zone, which is where you got to be at your best running the football, and they really didn't factor in much in short yardage and other issues like this. A couple other key notes in this game. Louisville has been playing most of the season without arguably their best defensive player. That's their linebacker, Stanquan Clark. He is an elite run stopper and has been sidelined since the very beginning of the year. Now, his status for the Clemson game might be one of the bigger unknown variables. On Halloween, reports indicated that they were pretty optimistic that he could be back by the Clemson game. He was upgraded to questionable prior to the Cal game before ultimately being ruled out. But if he plays, that could provide a pretty significant emotional boost. I'm buying that the swagger that Clemson carried with them last week, I think it carries over. I think Clemson might have turned the corner. I'm going to take the Tigers on the road. I think they will get a hard-fought and resilient victory against the Louisville Cardinals. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish travel to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This game will be 12 o'clock Eastern time on ABC. The Pitt Panthers are 7-2. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are 7-2. 2 of the hottest teams in college football. Both have been defined by dramatic in-season turnarounds, and because of the massive opportunity at stake for both, College Game Day will be right there live from the North Shore. That's their first show from Pittsburgh since 2005. Question number 1, can Pitt's offense keep it going? Now, this team has undergone a bit of an offensive metamorphosis. Their 5-0 streak has changed mostly because of what they're doing on that side of the ball. In that 5-game run, they've scored 200 points, which is pretty remarkable. And it all centers around the coaching staff's decision to bench the incumbent starter Eli Holstein and hand the offense to a true freshman quarterback, Mason Heinschel. And he has been named already a semifinalist for the Sean Alexander Award as the top freshman in the country. I don't know how many people have seen Heinschel play. He has been so good this season for a guy that's young and has really been the engine for the offense. It's now one of the best in the country when it comes to passing the football. His connection already with his wide receivers have been really good. Raphael Williams presents that quick strike ability on the outside. You just didn't have that as much with Eli Holstein. And this transformation has really invigorated this offense. And it's powered almost exclusively through the air. And the rushing offense, not great. They're in the hundreds. So their only viable path right now is through the air. So the game essentially rests on the arm of a true freshman. Question number 2. Can Notre Dame's pass rush disrupt this Pitt passing attack? Because Pitt's offensive line has not been great when it comes to giving up sacks. And this is not new. This has been something that's been a little bit problematic for a while now. If you look even to last year, they gave up 43 sacks. They've allowed 26 this season. And the low point came against Syracuse, who is fine, but not elite by any stretch in getting after the opposing quarterback. They gave up 7 sacks in that performance, and that's one thing Notre Dame has done a great job with, is that as the season's gone along, their pass rush has steadily improved. Because on paper, if you look at Notre Dame's pass defense, it's kind of vulnerable on paper. And they are right now 90th in college football, giving up over 230 yards per game. And if you look at how things went prior to the game against the run-heavy, one-dimensional Navy midshipmen, things didn't look even good prior to that game. Worse even prior to that game. And then Navy, of course, couldn't accomplish much through the air. So now the numbers look a little bit better. But is the secondary a problem? We'll see. I think they're improved from where they were at the beginning of the season, but it might not matter because that pass rush might be so aggressive and could overwhelm Pitt's offensive line. Question 3, can Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price run the rock against a stout run defense? Now, this game will mostly be decided between the rushing attack of Notre Dame and Pitt's defensive front. This is true strength on strength collision. It could determine pace. It could determine momentum. It could determine time of possession. And the Irish offense, which is very balanced, they're a top 25 rushing attack, just under 200 yards a game. And we all know just how talented their backs are. I mean, Jeremiah Love is starting to charge as a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender. He's nearing 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns. He's electric and explosive. And you've seen so many times over the course of the last 2 seasons, him just take over the game. I mean, he has an ability to just break the game open with one run, just like he did last week on the ridiculous 48-yard touchdown run where he's looked like he was down, regained his balance, and then boom, races towards the end zone. Now he's going against a great defense led by Pat Narduzzi. He's not the defensive coordinator, but the head coach. And if you look back at Narduzzi's tenure as a defensive coordinator at Michigan State and his time as a head coach at Pitt, they're all about stopping the run. And they have been very successful with that this year. They are the 3rd best rush defense in the country. They allow just over 80 yards per game. More impressively, they're number 1 in yards per carry. This is a group that's built on disruption, and they are really good playing behind the opposing offensive line. They make a lot of plays in the opponent's backfield. So getting the Irish behind the sticks and tackling Price and Love in the backfield will be a challenge, but it's one that Pitt might very well be up for. Question 4, can Pitt's defense anchor down in the red zone? Now, their red zone defense has left a lot to be desired. They're ranked in the hundreds, especially when it comes to goal-to-go defense. They allow touchdowns on 92% of goal-to-goal drives. That is 129th. So when it gets down there and the yards are tough, that run defense has to hold up, and it hasn't done such a great job of that up to this point of the season. Question 5, what is Pitt's injury situation looking like? And this might be one of the biggest keys of the game because they're coming off a bye week, and the number 1 point of emphasis, if you listen to the coaches and you read some of the clips, the biggest key in the bye week was not to focus on one specific aspect of their team. It was simply to get healthy. Starts with their running back, Desmond Reed, who's arguably their best offensive weapon. We've seen him in a boot after the NC State game. He's had an ankle injury. Him being at 100% because not only is he great running the football, he's an elite pass-catching running back out of the backfield. Him working against linebackers in man coverage could be very advantageous to the Pitt Panthers passing attack. Then on defense, they have a couple guys been banged up as well. Kyle Lewis, who was banged up against Syracuse. He's an All-American contender there at linebacker. He missed the NC State game, did return against Stanford, and had no limitations. But him being at 100% is of significant importance. And then the other linebacker, Rasheem Biles, he's missed the last 3 games. So those 2 linebackers, very important because of what's going to be asked of them in stopping this potent rushing attack. I also think, too, if they can somehow slow down the rushing attack, it's going to force the game into CJ Carr's hands. He's been improved on the downfield passing attack, and that might be where you have to get it against Pitt. If those safeties get nosy, if those safeties come up and try to stop the run, he's going to have to make them pay with some vertical shots off play action. I'm going to take Notre Dame, but I will take the points in this game. I think the Irish are legit, but this will probably be the best team they've seen in a while on the defensive side of the football. I think Pitt can and will be very sound against the run. I think their pressure packages could cause some problems for a young quarterback. I think Notre Dame wins, but I expect it to be close there in Pittsburgh. South Carolina travels to College Station. This game's 12 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN. The Aggies enter this game with a perfect 9-0 record. They're 9-0 in their season, so that means they're obviously undefeated in SEC play. They're 6-0 there as well. The Gamecocks, they're reeling. They're 3-6 overall, just 1-6 in the SEC. Shane Beamer has addressed some of the issues offensively. A few weeks back, they fired the offensive line coach. They just fired the offensive coordinator. And right now, it's been a challenge all season long for South Carolina to manufacture any offense against quality defensive competition. And the Gamecocks are 0-5 all time when playing at Texas A&M. So we know there's a big margin, about a 20-point line. What is the pathway to an upset for South Carolina? Here it is. Give you the keys. Number one, you better hope the home crowd's a little underwhelming at 11 a.m. local time. Just having been to Kyle Field, I don't expect that to be the case. Number two, you got to somehow figure out a way to stop the run. The Aggies are a top 20 run defense, and they have a powerful offensive line that could overwhelm South Carolina's rush defense, which has not been great. Even though they have pretty good personnel, they still rank in the 80s right now against the run, and they might be without a couple pieces along the defensive line. But if they can't stop the run, then A&M will be able to grind the clock and eventually wear down a Gamecock defense that doesn't have the depth that they had last year. Number three, somehow they have to avoid 3rd and longs. A&M's pass rush is elite, led by Cassius Howell's got double-digit sacks. This offensive line has struggled most of the year. Just referenced a little while ago, they fired their offensive line coach. This might be the most challenging thing for South Carolina to do, is to avoid those obvious passing situations where these pass rushers can pin their ears back and take off right at Lenora Sellers. So if A&M can get them in the 3rd and long, which is what they've done all year, it allows that number one ranked 3rd down defense in the country to feast. Opponents are converting just under 24% of their 3rd down attempts against the Aggies, and South Carolina's offensive numbers overall, they're 129th in college football. So they're going to have to be able to pick up some 3rd and longs, and that will be very, very tough against this defense. Number four, they got to hit some big plays. South Carolina's only hope, I think, is with the new offensive coordinator, Mike Furry. He's got to create some positive chaos. It needs to be some change-ups because A&M, they might be preparing for a bit of an unknown. Now, I think they're probably going to simplify, maybe use some tempo, try to manufacture touches for Nick Harbor on downfield throws. The big key is whether or not this new look offense can manufacture 4, 5, 6 explosive plays, because I don't see this offense being the type that can sustain 10, 11, 12 play drives against this Aggie defense. And then number 5, they got to force Marcel Reed into throwing 2+ interceptions. I just referenced the big plays created. I also think they need some short fields if they're going to manufacture points against the Aggies. I think A&M's just way too complete and good on defense to get beat. The only way they get beat is if they beat themselves. Give me the Aggies by 21 points or more. The Virginia Cavaliers traveled to Durham, North Carolina, take on the Duke Blue Devils. Duke is about a 6.5 point favorite right now. This game's 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN2. Virginia 8-2 overall, 5-1 in the ACC. Duke 5-4 overall, 4-1 in the ACC. 2 of the 5 teams currently tied with a single conference loss. So a massive game when it comes to potentially getting to Charlotte for the ACC title game. Look, the Cavs, they were in a great spot. Everything was looking good for them. They were the only undefeated team in the ACC. And then Wake Forest comes to town and takes care of business, ending a 7-game win streak. They were undefeated at home, and then they just scored 9 offensive points. That offense that was so high-powered, they were held without a touchdown for the first time since 2022, and the best start to the season in 35 years evaporated in front of a very disappointed home crowd. On the other side, disappointment might even be more significant for Duke because they just went to Hartford, East Hartford, to take on a non-conference foe in UConn as kind of a tune-up, and were stunned 37-34 in losing to the UConn Huskies. Now, this was a massive failure in the fourth quarter. You have a big fumble there at the end by Darian Mensah on the final drive when Duke was driving to try to tie or win the game. Biggest question here is question number 1. Will Chandler Morris be able to play? Now, what you've seen from Virginia's offense this year is almost entirely surrounded by the improvement that they've seen at the quarterback spot. And Chandler Morris transferring in was having a career year, 67% completion, over 2,000 yards, 12-5, but he's also really good from a dual threat standpoint. He's got over 200 yards on the ground and 4 touchdowns. And last week, they were up 3-0. Morris scrambles, slides, and then gets sandwiched between 2 Wake Forest defenders. He'd already been kind of dealing with a shoulder issue, but was kind of hit in the head or neck area, did not return. And then Daniel Kalen had to step in. He's a sophomore transfer from Nebraska. His final stat line was okay, 18-28, 145, didn't turn it over through the air, but it was only 5.2 yards an attempt. So the big play threat kind of went out the window when Kalen went in the game. Just for context, Morris was averaging more than 2 yards per attempt when you look at what Kalen did in that game versus what Morris had done throughout the season. Now, Kalen did finish with 49 rushing yards, but that's a really misleading number because it almost came exclusively on one play on a 54-yard designed run on his first snap that kind of caught Wake Forest defense a bit off guard, and for the rest of the game, he was a non-factor on the ground. Well, the official word right now for Chandler Morris is, quote, unclear. Coach Tony Elliott has said that Morris is feeling all right after the game, but immediately followed with this key statement, quote, anytime you get hit in the head or up above the neck, you got to make sure you take that with a lot of caution. Well, they need him in this game because Duke's pass defense is among the nation's worst. Question 2, can Duke's aggressiveness defensively be scaled back against a possible backup quarterback? Look, Duke's defense is 96th in the country right now in scoring defense. They're giving up just under 30 points a game. They're 102nd in total defense, giving up just under 400 yards per game. And under head coach Manny Diaz, he by nature wants to be aggressive. He wants to blitz, he wants to disrupt, he wants to move. But this aggression sometimes does leave them just a little bit vulnerable. And that has been problematic at times this year, especially when you look at the personnel that Virginia has. They have a great running back like Jamari Taylor. You got to be careful. One guy out of the gap could lead to a big play created on the ground. Question 3, can Duke's passing game attack an opportunistic defense? Look, Darian Mensah's season-long stats have been really impressive. 70% completion, nearly 2,800 yards, averaging well over 300 yards a game, solid touchdown to interception ratio. But last week against Utah, it was not what you want. He did throw 3 touchdowns, but you did have 2 picks. And the biggest mistake, arguably, of the season for Duke, that was losing the fumble when he was sacked on the final drive, just outside of field goal range, which secured the defeat. This defense for Virginia, very much built on transfers. They're pretty opportunistic, and they've kind of just found ways to make plays. For example, the win against Louisville, the defense scored 2 touchdowns. You get a pick 6, you get a scoop and score. So very important for Darian Mensah to be smart in this game, especially in the event in which Virginia is a little bit short-handed. The pick in this game is a very hard one to make. I don't know how you can pick this game without currently knowing the status of Chandler Morris. If he's playing, I feel pretty good about Virginia being able to hang in there, but if he's out, then I definitely lean towards the Duke Blue Devils. Therefore, I'm going to go with Duke right now and lay the points, because until he's cleared, it's a complete unknown, and I can't back the Wahoos unless I know their quarterback's good to go. UCF travels to Lubbock to take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. This game's 3:30 Eastern time on Fox. The Red Raiders are 9-1, 6-1 in the Big 12. Sole possession of first place in the conference right now. And for UCF, this is desperation mode. They're 4-5. They're 1-5 in the Big 12. And they're looking to rebound from a disappointing loss in the space game to the Houston Cougars last week. How does UCF manufacture an upset here? Number 1, UCF needs to be healthy. Their running back, Miles Montgomery, he's their leading rusher with nearly 600 yards on the ground. Shoulder injury in the Houston game after scoring a touchdown, did not return, was seen on the sideline with his arm in the sling. Their quarterback, Taven Jackson, he suffered a hamstring injury in the Houston game. So if he can't go, then it's Davie Belfort, who on the road at Texas Tech would be tough. Now, Belfort did energize on the final drive against Houston with a nice 32-yard scramble, but knowing the status of some key playmakers being at less than 100% would not be good for UCF's upset bid. Number 2, UCF has got to find a way to run the football because the Red Raiders defensive front is completely suffocating. Number 1 right now in rush defense. They give up under 75 yards a game. They are really good when it comes to yards per carry. They give up less than 2.5 per. BYU, for example, last week, they entered the game against Texas Tech having rushed for nearly 216 yards a game. Well, they suffocated them completely. The Cougars had just 67 yards on 2.5 yards per carry. So if UCF wants to pull the upset, they got to be able to run the football. Number 3, UCF has to win in the red zone. Because if you look at BYU, while it was a dominant performance, they won the game 29-7. It was kind of a frustrating day for the offense when you look at it for the Red Raiders, especially in the red zone. They were able to get inside BYU's 20-yard line 7 times. They scored just 2 touchdowns. They settled for 4 field goals. They also had a turnover on downs on the 4th and goal at the end of the first half. Now, UCF's red zone defense is not good. They are 107th in the FBS and allow opponents to score on nearly 89% of their trips inside the 20. So if UCF wants to manufacture an upset, they better keep the Red Raiders out of the end zone when the field starts to condense. I could see this being an emotional flat spot for Tech, but I just don't think UCF is the type of team that can take advantage. I'll take the Red Raiders, but I wouldn't be surprised if this game was a little bit sloppy for them, at least early on in the ballgame. The Oklahoma Sooners traveled to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. This game's 3:30 Eastern Time on ABC. The 8-1 Crimson Tide starting to really round into form on the defensive side, and the offense, just a super efficient passing attack that has been on their game almost every single week. The 7-2 Sooners still elite on the defensive side of the football. You look at the numbers kind of across the board, total defense, stopping the run, all these things. Their defense from top to bottom is very much probably the best Alabama will have seen up to this point of the season. Question number 1, how much will Alabama try to force the run game? Now, right now, Alabama, they're 120th in the FBS in rushing offense. They run for under 112 yards a game. Their yards per carry average is about 3.5. And last week against LSU, the rushing attack was neutralized again. They finished with just 56 yards on 26 attempts. The longest run was a 17-yarder. That was from their quarterback, Ty Simpson. And the leading rusher, Daniel Hill, had just 21 yards. And if there's one thing we know about Brent Venables, is that the defensive identity that he has instilled at every place he's ever been, they start by stopping the run. They are 4th right now in the FBS in rush defense. They allow just over 82 yards a game. Opponents average just 2.5 yards per carry. This is a really formidable front with probably the best defensive line personnel in the SEC. So you know that Brent Venables wants to stop the run. The question is, what resources defensively does he have to utilize to stop the run? Because if Alabama is unable to run the ball against the defensive line, then do you have to drop a safety down? Do you have to keep those guys at the 2nd level or the 3rd level? Do you have to keep their eyes in the backfield to respect the commitment that Alabama might show to running the football? So if he doesn't need to keep his safeties involved, he can keep them high, which would be beneficial in stopping what is an outstanding passing attack. But if Alabama can start to run the football and be patient and find some success on the ground, that would alter their defensive structure. And all of a sudden, those guys might be forced to play not just the pass, but also the run. So that might be kind of the enabler for the biggest battle of the game. Alabama's passing attack against an Oklahoma defense that might be able to dedicate all of their defensive resources to stopping it, which leads us to one of the biggest determining questions of the game. Question number 2, will Oklahoma's pass rush be able to get home? Now, one key area to look at here is the health of Oklahoma defensive end R. Mason Thomas. Now, he is a premier pass rusher. He's got great juice off the edge. He's registered a bunch of disruptive moments this year. The sack numbers are not massive, but the amount of disrupted dropbacks is. And the amount of attention you have to pay offensively to him coming off the edge. He's got a bunch of tackles for loss, he's got a handful of sacks, but his availability right now is in serious doubt. According to head coach Brent Venables, he had a, quote, little bit of a quad pull, end quote, during what was an unbelievable 71-yard fumble return to the house against Tennessee. He played just 17 snaps in that ballgame. So if R. Mason Thomas is out or limited, then you have to wonder, will Oklahoma be able to generate pass rush with just a 4-man pressure? If he's not out there, they might not be able to. So what does Brent Venables have to do to accommodate for that lack of a legitimate pass rush? He might have to blitz. Might have to manufacture some pressure by sending his linebackers like Kip Lewis or bringing a safety down and blitzing him. And a blitz-heavy approach would potentially leave Oklahoma's pass defense in a bit of a vulnerable predicament where they have some one-on-ones against Alabama's outstanding wide receivers and going against a quarterback in Ty Simpson that is really good at diagnosing where the pressure is coming from. He's been so efficient and just really, really smart all throughout the season. He has just one interception. He's thrown 21 touchdowns. And the way he can set the protection, the way he can get you lined up, make audibles, make adjustments there in the pre-snap has been second to none in all of college football. So Kalen DeBoer, along with Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator, they want to play kind of a spread it out. They want to do some air raid style, but more ball control air raid. So they're going to try to attack all three levels of the defense. And this receiver core is outstanding. Jeremy Bernard's been the bell cow all season long. Ryan Williams still has the ability to take over the game. And Isaiah Horton, with his length, becomes a real matchup problem for anybody on the perimeter. Question number 3, how will Oklahoma's offensive line hold up? Now, the Sooners' offense statistically is one of the worst in the SEC, but it's really been about the offensive line. If you look at the total offense numbers, the rushing offense numbers, the scoring offense numbers, most of their challenges have come because of some ineptitudes along the offensive line. And they've had some guys that have been in and out of the lineup. They've had some challenges there, and it was fully exposed against Texas when they lost 23-6. In that game, the Sooners O-line was completely dominated. They ran for just 48 yards on 30 carries, and they couldn't really get any push, which led Texas just teeing off and John Mateer feeling that pressure from the pass rush throughout the entire game. Now, Alabama's defense, they've been rounding into form these last couple weeks. I think Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, this defense, they have elite playmakers. Now, you look at the numbers, they're not going to blow you away. The rushing numbers, not going to blow you away at all. Now, very good in the back end, but when you look at it, they force turnovers, they force takeaways, and they make plays on the ball. Question 4, will their offense and John Mateer play a smart football game? When you watch John Mateer over the course of his career, not just at Oklahoma, but also dating back to his time at Washington State, the bigger the game, the more he has been likely to press. He has 7 picks this season, but you can even look back to Boise State last year, against Texas this year, against Ole Miss this year. There were times where he just was trying to do a little too much, and it led to either negative plays, interceptions, inaccurate throws, and poor game management. In this game, he's got to play smart because Alabama has forced 16 takeaways this year. They are plus 10 in turnover margin. Oklahoma, by the way, they all seem to be good from a penalty standpoint. So the entire team needs to be smart because Alabama does have some advantages and will take advantage of your mistakes if you decide to make them on a self-inflicted basis. Oklahoma's 109th right now when it comes to penalties. And while the offense is not the primary culprit, it's mostly on defense, but regardless, you cannot get behind the sticks against Alabama. And then question 5, how much will John Mateer's legs be a factor in this game? We've already documented that the run game for Oklahoma has not always been a real critical component of how they've been attacking folks. But I do think John Mateer's legs are massive in this game. Oklahoma knocked off Alabama last year, in part because of quarterback run game, and then they turned Alabama over. If John Mateer's legs can be a factor, and now Alabama's secondary has to go up and play the run, it could leave for some opportunities outside where Oklahoma's wide receivers could win some one-on-ones. I will not make a pick on this game. I'll be on the call alongside Sean McDonough and Molly McGrath from Tuscaloosa. The Iowa Hawkeyes take on the USC Trojans in what is a collision of football philosophies. This is 3:30 Eastern time on CBS. Lincoln Riley against Phil Parker. Sign me up for that matchup any day of the week and twice on Saturdays. Question number 1, Can Iowa's run defense get back on track? Now, the identity of this Iowa team and this defense has long been stopping the run and being super physical along the line of scrimmage. And going into the game last week against Oregon, they were giving up under 84 yards per carry. And then that identity against the Ducks was shattered. Oregon, they were able to push the Hawkeyes off the ball. They were able to gash the Hawkeyes at the point of attack. And the Ducks, they played the game in perfect Iowa conditions, rainy, chaotic conditions, and they kind of out-Iowa'd Iowa, right? Very, very uncomfortable to watch it, frankly, when you're so used to seeing Iowa just hold the point all the time. They gave up 261 rushing yards in the performance. They went from a top 10 unit to now 16th against the run just on one performance alone. And Oregon running back Noah Whittington, he had 118 yards, and they were able to consistently produce not chunk plays, but very productive runs. He had 7 rushes, and this Oregon team had 7 different rushes that went for 10 yards or more. If you look at the 27-yard burst that they allowed at the end of the half, that was just the second rush given up by Iowa this year that went for more than 20 yards. And against SC, people still think of SC and Lincoln Riley teams as a group that just wants to throw it all over the yard. They are not a one-dimensional passing attack. They have a very formidable top 25 rushing offense. They go for over 200 a game on the ground. And it centers around King Miller, who began the year as a walk-on and was thrust into the starting lineup because of a wave of injuries. And the running back room has really flourished. And King Miller has seized the opportunity. He currently leads the Trojans with over 630 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. He was a little bit banged up, but don't expect it to be anything long-term. Think he'll be ready to roll in this matchup. Question number 2. Can Iowa's offense control the pace by running the football? Now, Iowa has an elite offensive line, and I think they can win against this defensive line. I do think this SC defensive line is a little underrated. You'll look at the numbers and you'll disagree with me, but I'll explain why here in just a minute. If they can consistently create run lanes for Gronowski, their quarterback, and their running back, Kamari Moulton, then Iowa will be able to execute kind of that boa constrictor game plan that they've used with great success for as long as Kirk Ferentz has been there. And Gronowski is a 235-pound, short yardage, physical runner. He's a lot like Tim Tebow, frankly, when he runs the football. And the offense is going to be big, and he's going to have to factor in this game. He goes for over 300 yards on the ground this season with 11 rushing touchdowns. So this is going to be kind of a grinded out type of game for Iowa. You want 15-play, 8-minute drives that just bleed the clock, that keep this game in the teens, and more importantly, you keep Lincoln Riley's second-ranked offense sitting over there on the sidelines. I just referenced, though, that SC's defensive line, I don't think they're a liability. Some of the challenges that they've had in stopping the run this year have actually come because linebackers and safeties have not fit the run appropriately. So while you look at the stats, they're 61st right now, giving up over 140 yards a game on the ground. I think those are a bit skewed because of some really bad run fits at times. So if they can be sound in this game, if they can kind of abandon responsibility in the pass game and be sound, I think it might be tougher for Iowa to run the football than you might imagine. Question 3, can USC's offensive line provide time for Mayava? Now, Iowa's defense is designed to be really patient. They want to keep things in front. They want to try to confuse quarterbacks with coverages and different zones, and then all of a sudden looking like man, playing zone, looking like zone, playing man. They want to create confusion, and they want to force a quarterback to beat them by taking check down after check down after check down, and then hopefully on a 13, 14-play drive, eventually the drive stalls out, you settle for a field goal. Well, USC's offense is built on providing a clean pocket for their quarterback, and Mayava's been great this year. I mean, he has been really good, especially when the pocket's been clean. Even though the offensive line for SC has had to use some different combinations because they've had some injuries, they've been very good in pass protection throughout. They've allowed just 10 sacks in 9 games. And given how often Jaden Mayava is kind of running around, that's a pretty impressive number. So if you give him time, even against really disciplined coverage, these elite wide receivers like Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, they're eventually going to find some openings, and they're eventually going to create some things downfield that Iowa will be trying to defend all game long. Question 4, Can Iowa manufacture hidden yardage and or points with their special teams? Now, no analysis of an Iowa football game is complete without a deep dive into special teams, because they have a return specialist in Caden Wetchen, who is amazing. And in a high-stakes game last week against Oregon, Iowa's special teams made a very uncharacteristic blunder. They've snapped it over the punter's head. Now, I'm not anticipating sub 40-degree temperatures and rain, but if special teams is a problem for Iowa, there's very few pathways for them to find victory. However, if special teams is a benefit to Iowa, then a single return from Wetchen could be one of the biggest changes in momentum of the game, because he's a threat every single time he catches a punt to go 70 to the house that could flip the game on its head. I'm going to take a really good swing at this game because I love what I saw last week from Iowa. I love it. I think they were physical. They were outstanding. They had every opportunity to potentially win the game. They just couldn't quite close the door, and you tip your cap to Oregon for finding a way to win that game with the walk-off field goal. Iowa right now is on a baffling 12-game losing streak against ranked opponents. They have not beaten someone that was ranked since 2021. However, everybody continues to question SC's toughness. I don't know why, but this game feels a lot like Michigan to me. I think SC will be up to the challenge. I'm going to take the Trojans. I'm going to lay the points. I think it's going to be tough for Iowa to do it again after the disappointment of last week losing on their home field. The Florida Gators travel to take on the Ole Miss Rebels. This game's 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN. The line's about 15, 16 in that vicinity. Ole Miss is 9-1, riding the momentum of a flawless beatdown of the Citadel last week. And then Florida, they hit rock bottom, reeling from a runaway loss to a 3-5 Kentucky team where they got beat by 30-plus points. So how do the Gators pull the upset? Number one, they must get better quarterback play. Right now, when you watch DJ Lagway, there's a lot of things that just give off the indication that he's really uncomfortable. And last year, he was 6-1 as a starter, right? He was incredible, had an amazing true freshman campaign. But so far, it's been about the interceptions, 12 picks. Right now, it leads the country and accumulated last week in a spiraling defeat at the hands of Kentucky through 3 picks. He was benched at halftime for the first time of his career. Insert freshman Tramell Jones Jr., who was solid but unspectacular. He completed 9 of 17 for just 60 yards. So whoever they go with, they got to get better quarterback play. Number 2, they must run the football. Now, the lone bright spot of Florida's offense this year has been sophomore running back Jaden Baugh. He's got 750 yards on the ground. He's on pace to become Florida's first 1,000-yard rusher since 2015. So they got to run the ball, and they have to shorten the game. Now, the Rebels' run defense has been a bit of a vulnerability, but I think they'll completely sell out against the run this game, and they'll put all the pressure on the passing attack for the Gators that is down a few wide receivers. So I think you got to run the ball, even though Ole Miss will sell out trying to stop it. And an effective run game that'll keep Trinidad Chambliss and the Ole Miss offense on the sideline. Number 3, the defense better be a whole lot better than they were last week. They gave up 233 yards on the ground. And if you watch it, it was a really demoralizing performance from the Gator defense. Now, prior to last week, I really liked Florida's chances of playing the spoiler, but this week, I don't see it. I think this will be a rout in favor of the Rebels. The Utah Utes traveled to Waco, 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN2. The Utah Utes bring that 7-2 record, 4-2 in the Big 12. It's a non-negotiable, gotta-have-it winner if they're going to try to find their way into the Big 12 title game. For the Baylor Bears, they're 5-4, 3-3 in the Big 12. This is kind of the last stand for them to try to get a big win and create a little momentum heading into what would be a postseason in victory, because that would be their 6th win of the year. Both the Utes and the Bears are coming off a bye week. Question 1, can Baylor stop the run? Under Dave Aranda, a guy who is known for being a defensive mastermind, it's kind of amazing to see his defense ranked 113th against the run. They give up nearly 180 yards per game on the ground. And they're not just grinding out yards. They're giving up chunk yardage as well, 4.5 a carry. And Utah's offense, under offensive coordinator Jason Beck, they're all about the spread, power, run identity. And it's produced pretty remarkable numbers. They have rushed for over 2,400 yards this year. That's the second most in the country. Their production is consistent too, nearly 270 on the ground per game. So this is not a 3 yards and a cloud of dust outfit. This is an explosive and efficient group that is really hung on the back of what is one of the best offensive lines in the country. I'm expecting a lot of keep away from Utah in this game because the Utes, they want to possess the ball. They want to control the ball. They average controlling it for nearly 32 and a half minutes a game. That's top 15 in college football. Question 2, can Sawyer Robertson dial it up through the air? Now, this is probably Baylor's only path to victory because I don't think they can. I don't think they will. I don't think they want to win a 12-round heavyweight fist fight. They want to turn this thing into a track meet. That's where they need this to go because their run defense is a struggle. And I think Utah's going to be able to run the football. So it means that the Bears are probably going to have to score with them. And the good news is they have one of the best passing attacks in the country. They go for over 312 a game. It's top 5. And Sawyer Robertson has put up ridiculously gaudy numbers this year. Nearly 28 yards through the air, and he completes 63% of his passes. They throw the ball down the field. They want to create big plays, and they have a matchup nightmare in their tight end and Michael Trigg. Really big mismatch when he's on the field. And if Utah wants to employ a bunch of man coverage, then Trigg could potentially have a big game. Now, the Utes are pretty good in their pass defense. They're top 6 in the country, and their head coach in waiting, Morgan Scalley, has really done a great job throughout his entire tenure. Now, they don't allow a lot of completions, just a 50% completion percentage against them, and they've given up just 6 passing touchdowns all season long. So it's a really tough group to throw the ball against, but I do think Baylor has the weaponry to potentially do it. Question 3, can Baylor play clean football? Now, this is Baylor's Achilles heel. They are 122nd right now with a -8 turnover margin. That's concerning. Now, Utah, in the last couple games, they have outscored their last 2 opponents 98-21. Is a team that has found their identity. They're playing with supreme confidence. I think they're peaking at the right time. But I do think Baylor hangs in this game. I'll take Utah, but I'll also take the points. The game of the weekend, the Texas Longhorns traveled to Athens, Georgia to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. This game 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. The Longhorns' first ever trip to Athens. They bring a 7-2 record, a 4-1 record in the SEC against the Georgia Bulldogs, who are 8-1 overall, 6-1 in the league, their final SEC game of the season. For Texas, a third loss would extinguish any and all playoff aspirations, more than likely, but they are coming off their second bye week of the season. And that rest could provide a bit of an advantage, given that the Longhorns are going to have a couple weeks to heal up, a couple weeks to prepare. And Steve Sarkisian with extra time, I would think he's going to have a pretty good offensive plan for a Georgia team that looks like they're playing their best football. And for Georgia, they lose this game, obviously removes them from the SEC championship conversation. It almost certainly removes them from contention of being a top 4 seed. And it also probably removes the possibility of a home playoff game. But Georgia's surging. They're coming off their best performance of the year in a 41-21 road victory in dominant fashion against Mississippi State. They looked really impressive offensively. They have kind of all year, but it was probably the best the run games looked all year. They went for over 300 yards on the ground. Question number 1. Has Texas fixed their offensive line woes? Now, to understand this year's matchup, you got to first analyze last year's 2 games in which Georgia and Texas teed up. The narrative was absolutely determined in the trenches. Last year, Georgia's defensive front, they completely overwhelmed Texas's offensive line. In the SEC championship game, they sacked Quinn Ewers 6 times. In their regular season meeting there in Austin, they sacked him 7 times. So in 2 games, Georgia's defense was able to accumulate 13 sacks against the Texas Longhorns. Texas just flat out couldn't block them. The good news for Texas is that this is not the 2024 Georgia defense. The 2025 unit's pass rush has been less than stellar. They have just 11 sacks this year, but they did look a little bit better last week in getting after the opposing quarterback. They did lose a key defensive tackle, Jordan Hall, for the year against Florida. They just don't have a super twitchy front. They're big and they're physical and they're really built to stop the run more than they are built to rush the opposing quarterback. And Texas offensive line was a kind of a weak point for most of the season. It does feel like right now, though, based on the last couple performances, feels like they found a little bit of stability. They took their center, Cole Hudson. They moved him to left guard. That was a position that he'd played in the past. They insert Connor Robertson at center, and now they have a more veteran front, and the realignment has made a pretty big difference, and it was really noticeable with the pass protection they received against the Vanderbilt Commodores last time out. Question 2, has Arch Manning hit his stride? Now, he's first-year starter, and he had some struggles early on. There were some challenges. He missed a couple throws. The mechanics weren't great. He has really come through it on the other side, though, based on how he's played these last couple weeks. Now, the stats, pretty solid. Over 2,100 yards, 18 touchdowns. He does have 6 interceptions. But Steve Sarkisian, he's going to put a plan in place that will probably lean on the quick game. We'll try to get Arch Manning into a nice rhythm early. And I think Arch in this game needs to be very calm, needs to be surgical, needs to be opportunistic when using his legs. That's one thing that he has that his predecessor, Quinn Ewers, did not have, is that he can take off if for whatever reason Georgia gets a little too aggressive in blitzing or rushing the quarterback. He also needs to avoid trying to make those off-balance throws. That's what Georgia's defense always seems to force, and those off-balance throws can be off target, and that's when Georgia can make plays on the ball. But if you look at this Georgia secondary, they're pretty good. They are pretty good. 210 yards a game given up through the air, but the non-existent pass rush from the defensive line does force the secondary to cover for a really long time at times. And against these wide receivers, that might not be ideal. Question 3, can Georgia's rushing attack continue to flex against a great run defense? Now, Georgia's offense is built on running the football, 200 yards a game on the ground. And that attack last week really exploded. It was a season-high 303-yard performance against Mississippi State. And Nate Frazier, he became the bell cow last week. There were times in which it was him and Bowens, and you weren't really sure who was going to be the guy. Bowens at times after a fumble became the guy, and now Frazier's back in good standing. Well, he just had a career-high 181 yards and had a touchdown on just 12 carries. When you're looking at 15 a clip, pretty good in the SEC. And you look at the 59-yard touchdown run and the speed that was on display, the guy's the real deal. He's a home run hitter coming out of the backfield. In Texas, their entire defensive identity is built to stop the run. Now, they have an elite second level. Their linebackers are awesome, led by Anthony Hill. He allows about 78 rushing yards a game. That's the second best mark in college football. Is a physical, is a fast, is a disciplined unit that is designed specifically to shut down the opponent's rushing attack. Question 4, can Gunnar Stockton continue to be super efficient? Now, he has been a model of efficiency all season long. He's an outstanding college quarterback. Dual threat capabilities. The numbers are not going to just blow you away, but the interception numbers, just 2 picks on 258 attempts, goes to show you how smart he's playing for a first-year starter. He also always provides the element of being able to run the football. He has 7 rushing touchdowns this year, and you watch him when he was at his best. That was against Ole Miss. He accounted for 5 total touchdowns in that performance against the Rebels on 26 of 31 passing. Against Mississippi State, he was very solid as well. 3 touchdowns through the air, 264 yards. His primary directive in this game, though, is to protect the football, allow the offense to kind of lean on the rushing attack and kind of grind things out. But the Longhorns do give up some yards through the air. It was on display against Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia hit some big plays down the stretch, but in the first 3 quarters of that game, their offense at Vanderbilt was held mostly in check. So I think the passing yardage might be a bit inflated. I think they'll play well in this game. The question number 5, which QB do you trust more? That's kind of, I don't love asking that question right now, but in this game, I feel like the teams are very similar. Now, I think Texas, their challenges at times this year have been on the offensive side, and particularly along the offensive line. Well, Georgia's challenges this year have been kind of on the defensive side, particularly along the defensive line, which is really rare. They also have had some vulnerabilities in the back end because they haven't had that pass rush that they've always been able to hang their hat on. So when you look at these 2 teams, I think they're very, very similar from a personnel standpoint and kind of across the board. Which quarterback do you trust more? Do you trust the ceiling that you get with Arch Manning, knowing that he can make any throw on the football field, and when his feet are set and when he's decisive, He can drive it into very tight windows, and it does appear, after the last few weeks, it appears like he's starting to become the best version of himself, really starting there in the fourth quarter against Mississippi State, carrying over into the Vanderbilt game. Can he sustain the momentum that was created in those last 5 quarters through the bye week and into a hostile environment? Or do you trust Gunnar Stockton, who has been very, very steady all season long, but will be going against a better defense in Texas than what Georgia will put up against when they're going against Arch Manning? I'm taking Texas to win the game. I think Texas has a slightly higher ceiling on the offensive side than we've seen so far. We saw it in a gotta-have-it situation against Oklahoma. The offense played smart. They were able to establish the run. And Arch Manning, I think, will play the best game of his career on arguably the biggest stage of his career when he takes his team into a hostile setting and potentially hands the Georgia Bulldogs their second loss of the year. The TCU Horned Frogs travel to Provo, Utah. This game is 10:15 Eastern Time on ESPN. BYU 8-1, hosting TCU, who's 6-3. Both teams are coming off of what could be described as their worst case scenario losses this past week. Primary key will be which team can successfully overcome the trauma of last week's performance. For BYU, the 8-0 start, really impressive debut in the College Football Playoff Committee rankings came to a devastating halt, going to Lubbock, top 10 showdown, and they get beat badly at the hands of Texas Tech. The Cougars were held to a season-low 255 total yards, and the dream of that unblemished perfect season kind of evaporated right before their eyes. And for TCU, they have kind of been their own worst enemy at times this year. And they entered into the game against a struggling Iowa State football team. It was in Fort Worth. Iowa State had lost 4 in a row. They had a big lead there, even at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and they proceeded to lose the game 20-17 in heartbreaking fashion. Some costly mental mistakes that kind of gift wrapped the game and gave it to the Cyclones. 8:15 p.m. local kick. Weather is expected to be in the mid-30s. It wouldn't matter if TCU were a ground and pound outfit, but that's not them. They are the 9th-ranked passing attack in college football. They go for over 300 yards a game. So will weather, will temperature matter, will altitude matter in this game as well? Question number 1, will TCU's one-dimensional offense find success against a well-coached defense? This is the 107th-ranked rushing attack. So all the pressure is on quarterback Josh Huber, who's been really good, nearly 2,700 yards through the year this year. But against the Cyclones, he threw 2 very costly interceptions. And the offense as a whole just didn't play smart football down the stretch. He's got a great weapon in Eric McAllister, but there isn't a huge threat of the run, which means BYU could be teeing off in their pass rush, which could affect Hoover's decision-making. Because BYU's defense under coordinator Jay Hill, they're very disciplined. They're very opportunistic. They create some havoc. They have a +7 turnover margin. And despite their offensive struggles against Texas Tech, the BYU defense was still able to generate 4 sacks. That pass rush led by linebacker Isaiah Glasker. Jack Kelly is also a huge factor in the pass rush as well. If they can force Hoover into the same mistakes that lost TCU game against Iowa State, then that could be really big for the BYU Cougars. Question number 2, can BYU pound the football? This offense is a ground and pound outfit, man. They are 25th or top 25 in the FBS in rushing yards per game, over 200 a game. That's their core identity. They want to dominate the clock. They're one of the best teams in the country when it comes to time of possession. And on the other side, TCU's defense, despite some flaws, they've been pretty good against the run. They're top 35 right now, give up just under 125 yards a game on the ground. One thing we need to be monitoring here is LJ Martin. He's kind of the heart and soul of this offense. He's their running back. And heading into the Texas Tech game, he was the Big 12's leading rusher, was going for just under 100 yards per game. And if you look at the performance against Texas Tech, it just wasn't what you expected. He did have a shoulder injury a couple weeks back against Iowa State. He was listed as probable, ended up playing against Texas Tech, but he had a really tough time getting going, never really had a ton of opportunities, had just 10 carries for 35 yards in that ball game. Question number 3, can BYU's passing game attack a gettable secondary? Now, BYU's offensive weakness, so to speak, is their passing attack. They're 88th in the country right now on moving the ball through the air. So a big key in this game is whether the offensive coordinator for BYU, Aaron Roderick, is willing to kind of abandon the run-first identity and kind of thrust his true freshman quarterback, Baron Bachmeier, into the focal point of what this offense could become. They have an outstanding receiver in Chase Roberts, So they're probably going to try to aggressively attack, and defense that is currently in the hundreds right now when it comes to stopping the pass. So this game might very well be won by BYU doing the very thing they're at least comfortable doing. Question number 4, can TCU finish drives in the red zone? Now, TCU's offense, while they're top 40 in total yards, they are not good when the field starts to condense. They're in the 90s when it comes to red zone scoring percentage. BYU's defense, on the other side, very much a bend, don't break unit. They're top 11 in the FBS and red zone defense, and they allow scores on just under 73% of the trips inside the 20. They allowed just 2 touchdowns on 7 red zone trips last week against Texas Tech. I'm taking BYU in this game. I think TCU's lack of a rushing attack will bite them here. And like Texas Tech, I think too often they'll settle for field goals when they get in the red zone instead of scoring touchdowns. I also think cold weather, I think altitude, I think night. This is not just a great recipe for a really successful passing game from the Horned Frogs. So give me the Cougars and lay the points. Now going into our Giant Killers, gave you 5 last week. They went 3-2. Hopefully we can get a 3-0 streak this week. Clemson getting 3.5 against Louisville. I will take the Tigers there. I think Clemson is starting to play their best football of the season. The Arkansas Razorbacks are getting 6.5 against LSU. I think Arkansas's offense could make life very difficult for a really good LSU defense. And while Arkansas struggles on defense, nothing right now that I've seen from LSU concerns me when it comes to moving the ball on that side of the football. Texas also getting 6 against Georgia. So I'll take the points with the Longhorns there as well. That'll do it for us here. As always, college football comes to a close. We have loved this Week 12 preview. We hope that you guys are as excited as we are about some of these matchups this weekend. A lot of very important outcomes will be determined here in the next few days. We always encourage you, go subscribe to the podcast, go check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page, and always follow us on our social media platforms at AlwaysCFB on Instagram, Twitter, all those things as well. So for all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, intern Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.